Once upon a time, there was a young woman who wanted to see the world. Soon she knew she would settle down and choose some work to do and find a way to live for herself. But before she did it, she wanted to learn as much as she could about the world and have some adventures. Her family, her friends, her aunts and uncles, her elders, they all agreed that it would be a good idea for her to go and have some adventures and wander the world, perhaps for as much as a year, but that then she must return and feed her people with stories. She was given a small bag and asked to gather little tokens to help her remember the most interesting things she saw and the adventures that she had, and to keep them in that bag so that she could tell everyone the stories when she got back. She wanted to go very far, so she packed only a small backpack and she set off. She wandered through vast prairies. She passed mountains. She saw forests with enormous tall trees. She saw big lakes and small ponds and little streams and great rivers. And she met many different people. And she stayed with them when she could and learned what she could from them. And her story bag began to fill. She had a tiny pine cone collected beside a river where she had attended a gathering of people who came together to dance and to sing and to play. And she had a shimmery little piece of clamshell that she found on an island in the middle of the lake where she had gone to visit with a group who lived there, and many other things. She wandered so far, finally she realized it was time to turn around and head back if she wanted to make it home within a year. And just before she turned around, she had an experience that really changed her. She had finally gone far enough that people spoke a different language, and she didn't understand what was going on around her. Still, the people took her in, and they were very kind to her. They fed her, and they gave her a place to stay, and she helped them and watched their lives. She watched them take care of children and animals. She watched them building houses and taking care of houses. She watched them cook breakfast and dinner. One evening, she sat with them in a circle around a fire, and she could tell that they were telling stories. One person was speaking, and everyone else was watching them, and once in a while, everyone would laugh. She was completely carried away by the mood and wished so much she could understand what was being said. She thought about that throughout the night, and when she got up in the morning, she went out looking for a translator. She wandered around, saying hello to people, until someone finally said hello back to her in her own language. He didn't speak fluently, but he certainly spoke well enough that she could understand him and he could understand her. She told him that more than anything, she wanted to understand the stories. She was willing to do anything to help the storytellers and the translator in return for their gifts to her. She cleaned their houses, she gardened for them, she cooked, she carried firewood, she did any odd job they needed done. And in the evenings, they would circle up and tell stories, and the translator would make sure that she understood. And she listened very carefully and did her best to remember the stories as they were told, because she knew that she was going to carry them home and share them with her own family and friends. And she would gather little objects and put them in her bag, just as she had for adventures she'd had herself. Well, it was time for her to go home. She'd gathered many stories. She thanked everyone very much, and then she started walking. It took her a long time to get home, weeks in fact, and when she finally got home, all she did was rest for a few days. Then her family and friends came together, and everyone brought something delicious to eat, and they feasted. And after that, they sat in a circle, and the young woman began to tell her stories. She brought out her little bag, and took out an object and told of an adventure she had had, and everyone listened. She told of all the fun times that she had had and every interesting thing she had seen, and everyone remarked with delight upon these stories. Then everyone got up and stretched and took a break and walked around a little bit, and they came back together, and she said, "Now, I am going to tell you some more stories. These are not my own adventures. These are stories I could never have made up because they come from people who think differently than we do, people who know different things about the world than what we know. Listen carefully, because these stories will expand our minds and grow our hearts. Are you ready? Now listen."